Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Tuesday, May 10th, 2022. I'll go ahead with the roll call.
Steve Meyer,
Here.
Charlie Kimball,
Here.
Walter Robb,
Here.
Jesse Cobble,
Here.
Chairman Ryan Green.
Here. We'll go with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Fucking chair, man.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to public comment on matters not on the agenda for tonight. Is there any? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move on to our first point of order, point of business here, the AR1 zoning district review. So Bailey, if you want to give us the background on this.
Yeah, so we need to make some changes to our AR1, which is multifamily. And Sean and I went through our existing AR1 and just kind of made some recommended changes. Sean mostly made all of them. He had some great ideas that I think really starts getting to what the zoning board wants to see more of in this community. One of those is decreasing the density of multifamily and addressing some safety concerns of multifamily developments and higher density developments. Really, I think leading to a higher quality product.
Okay.
The reason that we're sending this to you now is because we all know that our zoning code needs a little bit of an overhaul, and you guys have been working towards that. But in the meantime, we thought you might want to get something on the books if a new development wanted to come in, which you guys all know that people are coming towards Johnstown with lots of ideas. So we thought that in the meantime, you guys can take a look at this and address it with comments and maybe get something on the books a little sooner than we can overhaul the zoning code. If you end up liking this, maybe we can even carry it through to the new zoning code. Instead of doing the work twice, do the work once.
Right. Go ahead.
Question, if it would pass, if we would pass it, when does it take effect? Immediately?
No, if you were to pass this tonight, it would go to council as an ordinance. Council has an introduction meeting and then they have a public hearing and a vote. So the next council meeting is next Tuesday, which would be their introduction meeting. And then 2 weeks after that, they would have the public hearing and the vote. They might have more comments that they want to provide. So that's not to say that it would take as little as 2 meetings, but it could take as little as 2 meetings. And then it goes into effect 30 days after the council vote.
They could pass it by emergency as well.
They could pass it by emergency.
There's some navigation room with the interpretation of what's the qualifier as an emergency. There may be enough room in that interpretation for that to occur. If that were to occur, it would go into effect immediately and it would waive the 30 days. So potentially it could go into effect next Tuesday.
Okay, but that's fine, but how does it affect the people that are already have made application, haven't had it approved yet? Zoning has not been approved.
It will not affect them because they've already submitted their applications
That's
and
right
paid
after,
for
so
those. But
this
it'll
only takes effect to
any-
people after that point.
Yes.
Correct. If they've submitted the application, they are under the rules that are
In place at that time.
during that time. So
We only have one project that has an application pending, right? The
Yes, that is
AR1,
correct.
okay. The apartment complex over.
If you'd like, I can run through the suggested changes that Sean and I made and you guys can make your comments. So the first one was decreasing the maximum dwelling units per acre from 12 to 8. And Sean provided a quick example to the side for the maximum number of units, using the Coghlan property as an example. If it was 7, the maximum number of units would be 84. You can read that comment. all developments will are required to have a minimum of 2 forms of ingress and egress for fire safety. That's a new thing that's not currently in there. Permitted and conditional uses stay the same, and then in additional district development standards, we provided you just a quick, for 10,000 square feet, that's about a quarter of an acre. And then we brought the height down, we brought the height down from 30 to 20 feet. And we increased all of the bedroom sizes. So for 1 bedroom right now, it's required to be 700 square feet, and we increased it to 1,100. And we did the rest for 2 and 3 bedrooms. And then we took out the allowance for efficiency units altogether because we don't see applications for those at all. Those aren't really a thing anymore. Sorry, I skipped over lot requirements, but we increased the side setback from 25 to 30 feet. And our current one says with a minimum of 10 feet on one side. We think that should just be 30 feet side setback. So each side, 30 feet. For conditional use structures, there shall be a side setback on each side of 20 feet. That's an increase from 12 feet. And then permitted and conditional structures shall not cover the lot by, that's 35% currently, and we decreased it to 28%. And then at the bottom of the section, we added some requirements that in this board we've talked about a little bit. So for each 15,000 square feet of bedroom area, there shall be 8,000 square feet of open space. That's an increase from the current 5,000 square feet. And then we added 50% of that open space requirement must be usable open space. So you guys talk about usable open space a lot, not just an empty field that someone mows and then ignores, but 50% of that 8,000 square foot of open space has to be usable, whether that's a playground or multi-use trails. People need to be able to get some enjoyment out of that. We added some references to Chapter 1183 for landscape standards so that people have it right there when they're reviewing this chapter. They know exactly where to go. A buffer zone of 25 feet. That's kind of if you guys want to increase that or decrease that, but a buffer zone between single-family residences of natural vegetation, and then lighting that's screened and arranged to reflect away from the adjoining property.
You guys have anything on this one so far?
Bailey, in A3 or AB3, the last one of the building requirements, looks like that sentence, the last sentence there before the site requirements is left off. I don't know if we just.
No, that's probably my fault. I just missed it. when I was
Little
talking
error.
over.
The minimum distance between the walls that have windows. I don't know what that was supposed to be,
I probably just missed it when I was copying.
but I guess it's not changed, so whatever it is. I like it overall. I think the setbacks are appropriate. I'd make these stuff, if it was my inclinations to go even higher on some of the square foot bedrooms and even the lot requirement, if you guys want to entertain that possibility. Can we get some more background on why we changed the height? I don't really understand that one, I guess. We're trying to make things shorter.
That's easy. It's basically do you want a 2-story apartment complex or do you want a single story? And that's up to you guys. Our assumption was we wanted a single story apartment building rather than a 2-story.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
maybe that's a wrong assumption. And it also
No, that's right.
decreases the amount of units that can be on a site. So they probably aren't even gonna be able to get to the 8 acre with all the setbacks that are put in place. So do you have a desire for it to be a 2-story or a 3-story apartment complex?
Nope.
I don't desire it to be any apartment complex.
Okay, so that's the general, okay, so you shocked me, I'm like, maybe we did something else.
No, I was just curious
No.
what the reasoning behind it was.
So
That makes sense.
No, so that's exactly right on the height there. But so with And you have Redwood in here as an example, which Redwood, yeah, they have 93 units over there, but it's really not that burdensome because of how they did it. It's spread out, it's single story. You know,
Garage.
it's not that bad. There's a lot of units in there, but
Yeah.
it doesn't look terrible. You know, they're not right on top of each other. So,
If we're using that as a guide, if you take the 93 divided by the 13 acres, it's 7.15. So I'd be up for just lowering it down to 7 or 7.5.
so they have us going to 8.
I guess it's not
So
that much
that's what I
different.
said. If you're at 8, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's
Fair
fine.
enough.
It's funny, Jesse, I added in 7, but then I went back to 8, so I'm not crazy. So that makes me feel better.
Yeah, because I have yet to hear anybody complain about Redwood Apartments over there. I mean, you know, they're not.
They're first class, they were really
Yeah.
done properly.
Yeah, and I mean, having lived in over there,
Have garages too. so-
yeah, they have
They got
garages. I mean, how they've done that is fine. And they do have green space over there. So while you guys look that over a little bit, let's go ahead and open to public comment. I know this is the first time we've heard this. Do you guys, I'm sure you guys want to say something, so go ahead. We'll go ahead and open public comment. Hey, you gotta say your name, where you live.
Cheryl Cool, 108 Maple Leaf Drive, condos in Johnstown. When she said something about using Coghlan as an example, would this encompass them or not?
No, since they've already turned in their paperwork, it wouldn't.
Sorry.
Really? Are you?
Here we go.
David Cool at 108 Maple Leaf Drive. My only question is, when you establish some nice new setbacks and some nice new rules and regulations ordinances, how extensive will be the variances apply, and how will they be administered?
You're talking about if somebody comes in for a variance.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, if they have to come in for a variance, that's a totally different story. That's where we have all sorts of leeway to decide what happens. So that's the nice thing about a variance, you could just say no.
We have a set of criteria that we're supposed to use to weigh the positives and negatives of the variance. Is it a small variance? Is it a major variance? So we have a whole set of criteria that we use. If you've come to a few of our meetings, you probably know that we're not huge fans of multifamily units so we would probably be hesitant to give any significant variance to a
Or
plan that was.
variances necessarily,
What's that?
Yeah,
or variances.
Or
Yeah.
variance is
And last
tough.
comment.
just variances in general.
Setbacks, they're promulgated from property lines all the time? Or are there exceptions to that?
So, so you're talking about a buffer on a property line?
Whether it's from a street, a city street, or whether it's from a neighbor's property.
Yeah, they'll say in there if they're from setback
It's not
or,
always from the property line,
It's-
because
yeah.
some people's property lines go to the middle of the street, in which case it's the right of way. But if your property line is.
the one
inside
he's
right of
talking
way, then
about
it's
will
your
be,
property line.
where you're talking about, it'll probably be from the property line. Because yours is
We have a
updated.
fence on our
Now,
property.
if you're on 62 or 37, you could be talking about one of those properties that goes out to the middle of the road. But that's back when, those were done when roads used to shift, plus or minus 6 feet. So,
All right, well, I just wanted to check.
The
Yeah.
shorter of the two, right?
Thank you.
yeah. So, I mean, in getting this done, and you guys have probably seen us work with new businesses on zoning in general, and we really push our new zoning code, even though it's still not in place yet. We still push that when we're working with everybody. So if anything comes in front of zoning, we'll work under the new guidelines as much as we can, because that's where we're headed. So unfortunately, not all the apartment complex that's being built probably won't come in front of us. If it does, we'll have our say, and that, you know, that'll be great, but it may not come in front of us, unfortunately. Now, if they need a variance, that's a different story.
David, as far as the variance criteria, we use a list of questions that the zoning commissioners are supposed to ask about the variance. And that is from Duncan versus Duncan, which was put together by the Ohio Supreme Court for a guide for variance. And we adopted those about 7 years ago.
I have a question about the usable space. 50% of the open space requirements must be usable open space with walking paths. That's for, so each business or housing company that comes here, they're gonna create an idea, then whoever's on the board that time will determine if that's qualifies as usable.
No, what we require when you turn in your site plans for engineering review is that on the front or very close to the front, you put a table that says percentage of building, percentage of structures, percentage of pavement coverage, percentage of green space, and then underneath the green space, we'll require that they list out the percentage themselves of what is usable.
Apartments.
So we don't do that calculation, they're required to do
I
it.
think the answer,
Or the,
Your question.
the red ones here.
you're asking what's the qualifier?
So what's like, yeah, who's gonna decide what
It's a
usable is?
wetland. So let's say, for instance, a wetland comes in and you got 10 acres and 5 acres of it's a wetland. That 5 acres
You
is out of the
can't
equation.
use
Now
it.
5 acres and I'm
So
splitting.
it's 990 for 2 bedroom.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So
So
we
the
have,
Or it's,
usability will be determined by.
so they're
the engineer.
1350
If it's
is what they're going to.
developable, then it's obviously usable, but if it's a wetland or something along those lines, then it's non-usable. I guess that's the short.
or it's a
Pretty-
strip of grass
strip.
between two houses
I
that's
like it.
5 feet wide, that's not usable. Unless you put a walking trail through it
trying
and
to
just
see
allow
how
people
big
to actually
10,000
use it,
square
but if
foot
it's
lot
just
is.
gonna grow up into weeds, that's not usable. And our engineers will
I was
say
gonna
Just
say
get a
yours
gauge
is
it off
probably a
mine.
little
So
less.
each,
Yours is
it's already
probably
on there.
like
for
about
each.
6.
And I think to piggyback off of what
Just
you're asking,
eyeballing it, what is it?
this is specific to the apartment
Can't remember
complexes.
what I'm trying to.
Go to
Probably don't have
that, go to
anything
that
in our
measurement
code
up there.
that delineates that percentage,
And then
so to speak. And
the other
heavy
one next to
capacity
it.
For housing.
Yep.
For commercial, we do, for housing,
then just
it's
click
not
on
quite
your-
there yet. So you're helping me out. You're gonna see.
You'll draw a
in the
square
near
with
future,
it.
Maybe in 2 weeks from now, a PUD draft, that's gonna identify some of that green space requirement. And I think
For new, okay.
yeah, Bailey's reviewing
now I'm
it
getting the
right
back,
now,
all the way to the
and
back,
if I'm
whatever.
not mistaken, it's 50% requirement now. Now, wherever
thing's
that
annoying
lands in the
sometimes.
final document, I don't know, but you'll be able to review that. And that same concept will be given to housing in a PUD situation.
So just to give you guys some idea, we looked it up. So the current Redwood apartments, they're 990 square feet, and most of them are 2 bedroom
Yeah, they are.
there. So this is more strict than that, which is nice. I could see if you wanted to downgrade it and go to, 2 bedrooms at 1,100 square feet, and then go down to 1 bedroom at 900. Just so it makes them all similar, but either way, I'm fine with either way. Cause you could do that 2 different ways. I mean, you could have a 2 bedroom apartment at 900 square feet and make it pretty close together. I mean, luckily their floor plans were pretty nice, but I'm good either way. But that gives you some perspective on square footage. Did you figure out how big that lot is?
Yeah, it's, I think about 1,300, so, it would be a little bit smaller than,
13,000 square feet?
yeah, 13,000.
13,000, okay. So the
But that's
lots,
assuming that a structure would be a one-floor structure, correct? That's what the assumption is. But if you go to New Albany, if you go right in downtown New Albany, all those structures in there have full basements. And full basements can be considered square footage. Is that, am I correct if you put it in there right?
Only if it has a,
An egress, right?
Yours and
If
your
you put an
neighbor.
egress in, then I could actually reduce the size of that structure. Our purpose is to make the structure be 1,300 square feet surface-wise. But I can make that structure 1,300 square feet with a with below grade like that and bring it up to that, and I can put 3 or 4 more buildings in there. In other words, I can skirt
Yours
it
by
by doing
itself.
that way.
So I think you'd have to check our definition, but our definition.
So do you wanna go to-
I'm just reading this, that's all I'm doing.
No, our definition of
I think
square
that's-
footage is, I
We don't want a
believe,
bunch of like tiny little apartments.
above grade. And Bailey can
That'd be
check
the
that if I'm
minimum.
wrong. And that's in the definition section of our general code. But it is delineated, if I'm not mistaken. If it's not, then we can add it as part of the definition. But typically, whenever you're looking at square footage of a structure, it has to be above grade. So for instance, whenever you identify a house, if it's a 1,400 square foot house, they can't include the basement because it's not above grade.
They put the egress window in it.
Yeah, if I put my
They put the
egress,
egress window
Not
in
even
it.
if it's an egress.
And I have
window,
one in my
because I
house.
believe the
that's how I
definition-
know.
If it's not, it should be, it has to be above
I
grade.
got one in my house, I know. And I can,
Confirm right
yeah,
now.
and I can actually claim it as a lot more square.
I mean, I list it. If I list it and it's got an egress window, I count it.
That's right.
I even count it off to the side if it doesn't have that egress window.
If it's not in there, then I would say that that's a larger discussion that you as a board would probably want to put in the definition section. to
We can just
define,
put above grade.
Right.
And put that in the definition
Yeah.
section, not just of this, but in your code, and then that will overlap into all.
Well, the purpose of this is to make lesser units in a big area.
Yeah,
I mean,
per
that's the
lot.
idea, but if I can shorten it up, by telling them I can use the basement, then I've added more places, okay?
Sure,
I've used your code to my advantage.
it's the footprint of the building. I built a couple of houses in New Albany, and every basement window had to be egress. And they would include the square footage into the, and it had to be finished too. And therefore, they included it into the total square footage available.
So should we do above ground square footage?
Yeah, you just say above grade.
So that's gotta be in the
That's an
code then,
easy way to
correct?
do it.
That's gotta be in the code then,
Yeah,
correct?
can we add that, Bailey?
Okay.
I've never seen that in our code.
I know we had to do something about defining,
Floor area of a residential building means the sum of the gross horizontal area excluding basement, vestibules, open or closed porches.
there you go. So it isn't.
Doesn't say.
And it doesn't say anything about if there are exit windows in the basement, so it just says excluding basement.
Can we just put above grade in the language in here just to make it clear? Even though I agree that it's kind of repetitive,
On the, yeah. Yes.
never hurts to make
Oh,
things
I
a
have
little
a
clear.
problem with that, but I sure as hell would argue with you.
You mean, just after the square, so
Yeah,
one
that-
bedroom, 1,100 square feet above grade.
Yeah, yep.
Is that a recommendation that you're gonna attach to this recommendation for council if approved by you all? We can take that and they can pass those in tandem?
Yeah, that's an update we're just making on this draft.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say for your lot size, 10,000 square feet, I'd want to see a half acre, probably. Because trying to fit an apartment complex, I mean, you could get a duplex, I guess, would count on a quarter of an acre, but that's tight because you got to count parking for both, and then you don't have much of a yard.
How big is our, is
And I'd really like to try to avoid like tiny apartment complexes, you know?
Sean, that lot down there that's on, what is it, Oregon, where it's the M over there, how big is that lot?
Where you at, Oregon?
So we have, what is it, Oregon and College?
Yeah.
They have that apartment over there, it's called the M or whatever. I don't know how big that lot is, but that's about as small as I'd want to see an apartment on.
Yeah, and those are all one bedroom.
Yeah.
Apartments.
I know what you're talking about.
Because that's,
Yeah.
I'd want to see probably closer to half acre.
Steve Randy Olin,
Which is a half acre.
Now we have 30 foot setback.
Half acre is 21,000.
Yeah.
You gotta have a big building.
22,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, because an
Wow.
acre's
Yeah.
40, like
Almost
close to
40,
44.
45,
Yeah, an acre's like the size of a football field, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you have a, what is it, 30 foot setback on a 10,000 acre,
That's what I mean, you don't have a lot of
10,000 square feet,
space.
Yeah.
So if you go to a half acre, that gives you room for your setbacks, some room to park and, you know, you're not on top of each other.
Yeah, that's a really good point with parking.
Give me a second, I'm trying to find what you're asking.
You guys all, everybody on board with raising it up to half acre?
Sure.
Yeah.
So Bailey, half acres.
Well, I just wanna know what that one there is,
Side, okay.
cause that's tight. Like that's as tight as I would wanna see an apartment unit in there.
Steve, what was the verdict on who makes the determination on usable space? It's not us, is it? Did you get an answer on that?
Yeah, it's,
Oh, just our engineer.
the engineers, yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I
engineers.
Yeah,
All right, so yeah, it's about a quarter of an acre. I had it in my notes, but they didn't.
cause I don't think you want Bailey out there measuring every lot and deciding
I
how
don't wanna
much.
be out there measuring every lot.
Yeah, just have the engineer do it.
For whatever reason, this one, the M, is not giving me lot coverage, but I'm gonna use the property. It's 0.23 acres, so it's that M property.
Okay.
Is actually less, or might be right at that 10,000.
Okay.
These are quarter acre lots right there, so
Yeah, it should be.
I don't know that you would be able to fit it in there. Let me do the math. Say, what's an acre, 43? Somebody know off the
It's
top
close
of
to
their head?
44.
Just use 44, that'll get you close enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so. So 11,000 square feet, so if you wanted to prevent that, I would recommend bumping that to probably a minimum of 12.
Yeah.
Just to be on the safe side, if that's what you're looking for. If you're trying to prevent an apartment complex from going into a site like that, then you would
Yeah.
go up to 12,000 instead of the 10,000.
And that needs, with the apartment, you need 2 parking spaces for each apartment too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. By the time you have your
Yeah,
parking, you have some green space for the tenants,
Yeah.
you have your setbacks.
Really-
Oh yeah, you need to be closer to 20,000. So that's
That's a heck of a count.
yeah. So I'd say we can just up that to 20,000 or half acre, whatever that is.
Half acre, 22,000, I'm good at 20. If you guys
Yeah.
want to go, let's do 20.
15 to 20.
So you gotta have 20,000 square feet. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
Lot.
It's a little bit smaller than a half
Approximately a
acre.
half acre, yeah.
Yeah.
Just shy.
You guys on board with that?
Yeah.
Because as we
I don't think
grow here in the city and
That's
they
what I'm looking at.
they
I'm
fight
looking
for
at the
more and
future.
more multifamily housing. It's
Yeah.
a lot easier to buy a quarter acre lot in town and stick 4 or 5 units in there.
And it's better
So-
to,
and it's not something we want to see really.
as we're learning our lessons, it's better to make things more restrictive and back off of it if it's a good plan than have it less restrictive and, you know,
You can't fix it.
right.
Because they could have that. What's the one that was over there on the news that was purchased here recently?
Oh, that would be Woodgate.
Woodgate.
Yeah.
If a new buyer comes in there and decides to tear some of that down and
So Bailey actually is
No,
gonna be.
they're
the insight on that
non-conforming.
one.
They can't tear the buildings down and replace with apartment because they're non-conforming.
okay,
They can update the buildings, but they can't replace them.
okay,
Wow. If
I
there
heard
was a
the movie.
natural disaster, like a tornado, then they'd have a year. But you can't go in and purposefully knock them down and try to rebuild them.
Really?
Are you able to pull up the zoning
Oh,
map for
fire.
that, Bailey? That may be
Yeah,
helpful.
Serious.
that's what I was saying.
I mean,
I heard they're already moving people out of this.
Even if there's a fire, don't you have to follow the original footprint?
Correct, yes.
yeah,
Yeah, you can't step outside of it. Bailey's gonna bring up the zoning map. Now, there are, some expirations on some of these, so this is not exact, and that's gonna be something that we're gonna get up to speed on. But just for generalities, like you mentioned, can they do this anywhere in town? No, it has to be zoned AR1.
Right here.
And what Bailey's gonna show you is where that Woodgate exists, and the AR1 is the orange for easy reference
Yep.
sake. So all of Briarwood, let's say, if we didn't pass this, they wanted to come in at Briarwood there and
Do a
do the exact
three-story.
same
Yeah.
template that you see down there at Cold Drive. There would not really be any restriction to prevent that. So what we're trying to do is is obviously any infill or any pre-existing that locks in what we've got or doesn't allow for this to happen anymore. So,
I didn't even think about the pre-existing, because there's not much out of infill in some of the spots, but.
there's not
yeah.
a lot of AR1 and
But you're right. Some of those are getting old and are potentials for, if we don't have, a good plan, I agree. I think it's a great idea. So we got that 20 Bailey. We got
30 feet.
There may be some spots in town where people want to come in for a change of use or something like that too, and this just outlines what they're gonna have to do. So it may deter them from even asking,
so
because
some of
they're
these
gonna
AR
look at these
ones.
lots and say, that's not even gonna work for me anyway.
Some of these AR ones are gonna expire. Is that what you said?
No, they'll still be there, but what I'm saying is that the buildings, if they
They're aging. I got
If they
you.
want to tear it down and put up a Coghlan design style building, nothing's going to prevent them.
Yeah, I got you, I
And
got
there
you.
are some identified, there's, in the AR, the undeveloped ones are going to be, there's some out by Cherry Hill that's designated as AR, but
Yeah.
I think that's, so, and once it's zoned that, to pull back the zoning from that, we'll get into that later, but that's a legal nightmare, because then
Yeah.
it's called a taking.
We can't unilaterally change their zoning, right?
You have to get property owner's consent in order to do that. And typically, there's a compensation situation that has to happen if you're trying to change the zoning. Now, if they're agreeable to it, then great, take it. But if they're not, then it becomes a lot more complicated, so.
Just pay him.
If you're going more restrictive, if you're going the other way, they don't usually have a problem. Yeah,
Absolutely. So,
Money talks, baby.
yeah. All right.
Is AR1 our only multifamily that allows multifamily as a non-conforming, or as a conforming, like?
Yeah, our GCC one allows for second
Second
story
story, that's right.
residential, but we don't necessarily consider those AR because they're just second story.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider that multi, yeah.
And it's a conditional use in that district.
Okay.
Right. Now, that's something we could, I mean, if you really want to, we can update that later on. I mean, we can do that in our general zoning. Just say, have standards for a GCC one residential. Has to be so many square feet or whatever you want to do with that, but
Yeah, I don't have a big problem with the second story apartments. If someone with commercial underneath, I think it's a cool look. It expands.
And they're really limited to whatever the building is.
right.
Yeah, so I'm not worried about that. I just was curious just wanted to confirm that.
Yeah, you would just, when they come in, if they're trying to stick 4 units upstairs of a 2,000 square foot building, that's a no. Probably.
Probably a no fire code too.
Probably, yeah. If they're gonna meet just the fire
That's a
code
good
and that's
thought.
it.
That's a
Yeah.
good thought. Some
Define for me
limitations on
what
it.
second story means, because if you go down to, is it Briarwood, I think? Their first floor is kitchen and living room, second floor is bedroom. Okay, so that's 2-story. Correct or not correct?
You are correct. I think what Bailey's saying in the GCC one, this was something that got amended 2 years ago, 1 year ago, so I'm not as up to speed on it, but I believe it identifies it in the code that first floor has to be a commercial use.
It's basically
It
offices.
doesn't allow for
downtown.
residential uses on the first floor at all.
Okay.
And it's really limited to
It
like,
only allows it on the
Taxpayers.
second floor.
That's what they're called.
We had a business owner that was building apartments
Fire term.
over top of his
Right.
building. We found
We call
out
them
by
taxpayers, too.
accidentally, and I put a stop work order on it, and then we had to revisit it, and that's how we came up with allowing second floor apartments. So
And it's only in commercial structures. So basically, if you bought an empty lot in GCC, you can't build a single-family home. It only allows for second story in commercial structures.
And if you guys were worried about that, something that you could do is identify a minimum square footage.
Right.
So it would take away from the efficiency apartments
Well, this has minimum square
Okay,
footage.
there you go.
The GCC.
No,
That's what we were talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah,
That's what we were talking about with GCC one.
Right,
We would do a
GCC
minimum
one.
square
Right.
footage.
You can identify it as
Yeah.
1,200 square foot or 1,000, or, and you
You
can
could
base
just
it
carry
upon
this
bedroom.
over.
Yeah.
Because in a downtown district, sometimes you get those neat studio apartments for
Yeah.
those weird millennials.
There we go. Watch
That
that name.
exist.
Watch that name,
But
Colin.
if you go down to Market Street or something like that, New Albany or some of those Dublin areas, the bridge project they've got going on, there's some really cool things there. I don't know that we're to that yet, so that's something you can incorporate later. I think you may get a product that you're not in love with at this point, but
Yeah.
down the road, that may be something that's really neat to mess with. So-
Right now,
I
you're
think
gonna
it's
end up
cool.
with a bathroom that has a kitchen above the sink and,
I like these
or that has a sink above the toilet. And, you know, some of those apartments down there, if you've ever been in any of those apartments down there, there's some interesting things.
Right.
That's I mean,
There's some, yes, there, yeah. Do you have a question?
Yes, I got a question.
go ahead.
The 20% pavement, I don't know what that looks like. For pavement of your lot, parking, is that enough? Is that gonna make parking worse?
They cannot they cannot get an approved zoning certificate without meeting the parking requirement. So if they make a proposal and their pavement is over 20%, obviously it's not gonna fit. And then they say, well, if we decrease the parking, then we don't have enough parking for all our buildings, well, then your buildings won't fit.
So it makes you scale down the building.
So it makes
So
you
it's
scale
part
down
of
your
the
development.
same
It's
approach.
part of the negotiation and, you know, in that circumstance, you know, if it's a project that looks like it's beneficial to the community that the commission likes, then you can work with them one way or the other to, you know, it gives us some leverage in negotiating a site that looks good and works, you know.
Okay, that
Yes.
makes sense to me
Um,
then.
But it is tricky, you're right.
Yeah.
It is tricky. But those,
That's good for us.
yeah, the restrictiveness
I like
is.
it. And I like the numbers that are on here
I do too.
for the 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms.
And we're trying to encourage, that's one of our big themes, is trying to encourage green space, walkability, like, we've spent a lot of time incorporating that into all of our codes, updates over the last year.
But these give you good livability too. I mean, 1,100 square feet for a one-bedroom house is good. That's
Oh,
good.
yeah.
That's good. I mean, these are livable. I mean, they give you a chance to have a house or an apartment, whatever you want to call it, that you can at least move in, you know?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
have stuff outside.
The only other thing that I had, and, you know, I don't have to belabor this anymore, but is whether we wanted to put under the site requirements part, if we wanted to require sidewalks, is that already required in some other?
You are,
Part-
any development that you have, you're required to put in
Okay,
sidewalks.
so I figured that.
The
so that would-
sidewalks
That would just
and-
be repetitive.
And,
okay.
no gravel parking.
Yeah,
That's even better.
Minimum number of units is my last thought, and I think with all the other stuff we have, I think it's
minimum number.
a number of units, like, per development, I guess, project,
Don't you mean maximum?
or minimum.
In 1 minute before we.
Well, so
before
you
we-
couldn't have like a two unit apartment complex.
Multifamily is defined in our code as three
I'll
or
give you a
more.
minute before we
So-
vote on this.
Yeah, never mind, just scratch that thought, I don't think it's really productive. Go ahead.
That would be.
Excuse me for interrupting, but you mentioned something that struck a bell, and that is parking. I heard 20%, and I've been told that the project that's involving us is like 35.5%. And so, even though this doesn't apply to that,
It's 20% in our code right now, so their pavement is over, and they're gonna have to decrease it.
thank you.
Yep.
I'm sure you'll jump right on that.
And when
All
they
right.
come in for a variance, you guys can come in to make sure we make the right decision.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll bring popcorn to that meeting.
I have a question. I just want to know.
Go
the
ahead.
answer.
Yep.
I was here earlier and listened to him, and we talked about the 5-foot sidewalk. So does it have to be a 5-foot sidewalk, or does it have to match the current sidewalks on both sides?
5 foot to be ADA compliant.
Yeah, I know.
Now,
But-
we were allowed to, 88 allows us, if you have, a good example is Middleburn, right across the
Right.
street from you. There was houses built on each end with 4-foot sidewalks. So we didn't want to keep going back and forth, and there was one in the middle. So we allowed 4-foot on that side of Middleburn. On the other side, it'll be 5-foot on Abadachia.
Yeah, but, so if you have a house here and a house here that have sidewalks, then you build a house in between, does it have to match, or does it have to go to 5 feet?
We match them, we try and match.
So matching's okay?
Yeah, matching's
I mean,
okay.
when it's already established, matching's okay?
What we've done in larger areas, so let's say it's not a house, but it's like a large area of open space, we have them gradually grade it down. So you can't really tell, but it will gradually taper
That makes
down
sense.
to 4 feet. Normally, if it's a house, you can't, it doesn't really work very
Right,
well.
that don't-
If
yeah.
it's a larger space but we try to have almost all of our developments do 5 feet now.
Is that just something you just do? I mean, it's not in the code particularly. I know code says 5 feet, that I know.
Well, I thought the code said ADA,
The new one
It
says,
is ADA.
the
Yeah,
new
that is
one at
ADA,
least does. I
yeah.
don't know about the old one, but
because if ADA then goes in and changes it
Yeah.
to like 6 feet, then we
You're
don't have
talking
to go
about,
in
there's a
and
push
change.
to change it to 6.
Right, there is.
It's basically a
that's
path.
a wide sidewalk.
Yeah, multi-use paths are 10 feet.
I know that, because we're getting ready to do something.
Could drive a truck down 6.
Well, if you think about,
You've done it,
think
I
about
bet.
the scooters and
Maybe.
stuff that people are using now, and they ride them on sidewalks, so.
I think my driveway is like 8. There's just enough room for my truck on my driveway.
I say.
See my kids try to ride
Yeah.
around their bikes around
do that?
sidewalks.
So anybody have any other questions, anything? Are you all pretty comfortable with this, enough to pass the recommendation to council? Okay.
So,
I'll motion for a vote.
Yeah, we haven't heard much from you. What do
well,
you
I
got?
just want to make sure, no, I just want some clarification as far as minimum lot size, 20,000 square feet.
Yes.
And let's see, there was another change too. I'm trying to-
Above grade.
Above
written
grade,
after the
right.
square feet.
So what we vote on would include the above grade for the square footage, and then also the 20,000 square feet, approximately half acre.
Yes. Was there anything else we added to that? Okay.
Didn't hear anything, so.
All right. So I'll go ahead and make a motion with those changes.
I'll second it.
There you go.
Second it.
Yeah.
Comment.
We'll open for public comment. Sorry.
I thought we did.
We'll go ahead and close public comment. And we'll go with a roll call.
Steve Dyer,
Yes.
Charlie Campbell,
Yes.
Jesse Cobble,
Yes.
Sherman Green,
Yes.
Walter Ross.
Yes.
All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to our zoning code draft review and discussion.
How'd it go this week, guys?
So I know that the new guys are all getting up to speed on that. How are you? Do you have any changes so far that you wanna
In this?
add? Yeah. So essentially, I mean, we've gone through the whole document. And I know that there's some changes that we'll probably want to make. I want to give you guys a chance to go through everything before we go ahead and pass that. I know with Intel and all that good stuff. Thanks for coming, guys. I know with Intel and everything new, there's probably some things to change. But I know we've also had the conversation now with council that we might bring an engineering firm in and do the comp plan and do some things like that. So I'd say the big things for us is we need to make sure that it matches our current design review, because we've already run into some areas where they don't exactly match up 100%, I think. So I would say maybe we have one work session with design review before we pass it to make sure that everything is on the same page. We get it passed, because I think this version is better than what we currently have in effect. And then I think we're gonna have to come through and, you know, just like we did with this, go
an
through
ongoing.
certain spots and, you know, it is a living document kind of, so
Yep.
it's gonna be amended. I think that's what we're looking at. And then after we have our engineers and everybody, whoever we bring on, go through everything, we may make some changes then. But at least this gives us something to work with until then. Because otherwise, we're stuck on the old zoning, trying to go through that and make that. That really does not match our design review at all. So I think that's where we're at. Go ahead.
I sat tonight and listened to the talk about the new bell thing, okay?
Yeah.
And it brings up, and you were here, Sean, it brings up a tremendous amount of controversy because the design review wanted them to do something with setbacks. And we already set setbacks. And they had things they wanted to do with the building that they didn't feel fit what they wanted, or maybe what they thought they wanted, but yet we already said, well, we haven't given them a permit yet for the zoning on the, have we, Jim?
Yeah, what did they do on their decision with that?
Yeah, they passed it.
Oh, they passed
They
it?
passed it 2-1.
Or the setbacks.
No, they passed their design.
COA,
Right,
Okay.
as shown tonight.
right.
Oh, they didn't change anything on it.
You know,
Okay.
but those things came up, and then the village administrator came up and said that he wanted to change the sidewalk to be in their stuff. In other words, on their land, not on our land, okay? And to me, those are kind of things that we need to get together and talk about so that we're not saying, yeah, this is what you want. The guy said that he designed it, and that's what he said. Well, I designed this based on what zoning said, and then they want to change it. They would have changed the zoning, like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's tough on someone. I feel we should be on the same page when we do something so that, hey, this is, you give us the design guys say, hey, that looks good, that's what we want.
Right.
We fit it into place, like that, and that's how it goes. I mean, I think that makes the most sense.
I think there's a caveat in there that says basically go with zoning
Yes, it says.
until this is more stringent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it goes with that. Just like with HOA guidelines, you go with zoning until the HOA is more stringent.
Yeah.
And it works the same way. So, but I do agree. I think we need to make the two documents closer together and be very clear of, okay, you're going with zoning until this says otherwise.
Right.
Yeah. And I know that setbacks was a big thing on that corner there because it kind of dictated everything. My thought was they need to do something more substantial, but bringing it to the road, I was in favor of bringing it closer to the road because you are downtown and everything's closer to the road. And you want to fill up that lot space because it's prime real estate. You don't want it all full of concrete. You want it full of something that's getting us tax money and providing services. So
We have another challenge in that this recommends new zoning districts, and you can't take away someone's permitted use without their agreement.
This goes back to that comment that I made with AR1.
yeah.
This code that you're looking at, and I'll let Bailey speak about it. Can you expand on what you're saying?
So the design review boards has conflicts on permitted.
No.
This has to do with
So, your property right now is GCC. And if you weren't on this board and I came in with a brand new zoning map and your property was rezoned to residential, and you didn't know about it, I can't do that. We can't do that.
Yeah, right.
So we can rename the uses, but then we need to go through and make sure that when we design a new zoning map, all those properties have the same exact, they're not decreasing their permitted uses, if that makes sense.
Because that's
We
a
can
legal
increase
challenge.
their
Because we
uses,
can't
but
do
we
that.
can't decrease them,
Right,
is that what
the
you're
way.
saying?
Yeah.
And maybe the best way is give you a visual. Can you pull up that zoning map again, Bailey? And while she's doing that, I've had a chance to.
This is probably the best visual.
I haven't had a chance to go through the complete draft, or even
Yep.
start on for complete transparency. We've been a little busy last 3 days, but I'll hope to get to that and give you any recommendations. So while she's got it, so she pulled it up. So if you can see that pink area, that's all GCC 1. Now that stretches all the way from Jersey Street clear over to Maple. And what Bailey's saying is however that came to be a commercial district, Williams all the way over there, that is what the zoning exists currently. If you were to go in and just say, well, we're gonna restrict the GCC one district from Oregon to Casson and from Maine down to
Right, you can't just
Pratt,
change it, right?
you can't do that. You have to allow for that usage to continue unless the property owner wants to make that change. That's what she's saying. And she's
So you can rezone it, but as long as they still have the.
I can't
same-
rezone.
You can't
it.
rezone it.
You can't
Okay,
rezone
That's
it.
what I
You can
thought.
name it, but you can't rezone it.
Yeah.
But you could, so if you keep the same, just to get my understanding, so if you keep the same zoning, but you can't just decrease any of the approved uses, like what if we just change like, okay, instead of an office space and now you can have a daycare there too, what if we took daycare away? That would be restricting the permitted uses.
That's a great question. I think you can navigate that a little bit, but I think the basic concept is if it's commercial.
You can't make
commercial,
it, you can't restrict
Residential,
commercial.
residential, you can obviously look at the usage. I think in ours, we currently have tanneries and some of the light manufacturing.
No, we took those out.
Yeah, we took those out for
It's a
sure.
great example.
Yeah.
So you took that out. So if you had something that was outdated or that you didn't want to see in there, you could take that out. It still allows for that property to be a commercial
Okay,
use.
gotcha.
It doesn't allow it to be specific.
Well, like these properties along 62 are zoned AR1, and I don't know how that happened. They probably shouldn't be zoned AR1, but we couldn't go in
Mm-hmm.
and say, okay, we're just gonna change you to UR1. You can't do that. Even if it makes sense,
Yeah.
even if we don't know how it ended up as AR1 in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
you can't do that.
My guess, I mean, I had heard this somewhere, and I don't know if Jim told me this or who told me this, but they said that they went GCC 1 there because it was the most restrictive zoning they had at the time.
And I think part of it too was the original thought was before shopping centers and all that.
Yeah.
And before Johnstown had shopping centers out on 62, they always thought the business district was gonna grow.
Yeah.
So where's it gonna grow? It's gonna grow up North Main and down South Main, and it's gonna grow on Coshocton Street. I mean, it's very logic thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that was the reason it was done that way.
But one shop at a time.
And I appreciate you
Not-
looking into that
not
for
like-
us too, Jim.
yeah.
I meant to thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So if what are they wanting to change it to? This zoning? What's it gonna be changed to?
Old Village Residential,
Old Village okay.
Now,
which
Betty,
isn't commercial.
Right.
the one thing that we can change is when we've done map amendments. So, because that was brought forward to us.
By the property owner.
So where we did map amendments, there's quite a few of them that aren't showing on this map here. I have a record of
No,
them.
that's true.
Yeah, we need to bring those in.
Yeah,
This map needs
For
to
sure.
That'll be on that list that
yeah,
keeps
it's,
growing.
it's,
Yeah.
it desperately.
So you want to
needs
change some of this?
So can we go to the, are we allowed to go to the homeowners and say, hey,
New zoning.
because
then we
Jesse
need to do
lives there and he
that.
didn't even know it was
But we need to make
commercial.
sure that all the uses are correct with the uses. in
Yeah,
this.
would they each get a letter?
Yeah, you
Certified
just get a letter and say, hey, I'm sure you'd rather have houses
Well,
around you.
if I'm back here and my property is AR1 and I'm thinking, man, that's gonna make me some money.
Right.
It's, every circumstance is different. On the Main Street circumstance where that GCC one, I bet you could get a lot of buy-in, a lot of current owners buying into switching that if that was one of the goals.
I guarantee you there's one guy probably that owns 5 lots that's planning on doing a commercial use though.
Probably.
I haven't been through there lately, but I bet you there's probably one.
Is it an individual thing? In other words, 10 lots, I own the center lot, and I want to go from AR1 to CCG1 or something like that there. It's my choice to do that for that lot?
Well, to get a rezone, you have to come to this, you have to
Yeah.
apply to this.
Well, I'm not
commission.
how would I say that then? You said I
So-
couldn't rezone it, but I have to, I can.
You can rezone it.
I can
You
rezone
as
it.
The property owner
owner
can
Yeah.
apply to
And so
rezone.
it could be an individual thing, though?
Yeah.
So right in the middle of everything, you could go to a commercial lot.
I mean, you
Not
can ask for
necessarily.
it.
I can ask for it,
If
correct?
this board
Yeah.
thinks it makes sense, you
In
could have
council,
one.
it has to go to
In
council.
council too,
And-
right?
And it has to align with the future land. So technically, for legal purposes, let's say you have that scenario, somebody is in a GCC one right now.
Right.
And they want to go to a residential. Then, from a legal perspective, we have a future land use map, and if you want to pull it up, you can. We would then look at that future land use map, because that was done by a committee, a survey, and they said, this is what we want this
Right.
future land use to be. Now, it's not that right now, but this is what we want. And if it aligns with the future land use map, then this board can look at it. They can still override the future land use map, but you run into a lot bigger legal struggle with the residents that are surrounding it, if you do that.
And you run into spot zoning, which we don't want.
Exactly, so usually the proper process is to go change your future land use map first, then bring the application before the board to go through the
Yeah.
rezoning process.
And you'd have to rezone it, you'd have to file for a map amendment, and with that, all the contiguous property owners would have an opportunity to come to the public meeting, sort of what we just went through with the
With
old
the-
Catholic Church.
Yeah.
That's a good example, which it wasn't allowed. And when the zoning changed, it
Yeah.
wasn't allowed.
And in the future land use map, I believe that's identified as institutional, or no? So it's institutional now, and institutional, we do allow for.
Special use.
Special use, that's what it is. In special use, we do allow for signs. So if they were to make an application to rezone that property, it would align with what the use is, and then they probably wouldn't have even needed to come in for a variance for their sign. So maybe next time we say, hey, clean up the site and get it rezoned, which is a pretty easy process.
We did that
Which
for
we
the
did
one
that with
across
one
the
church,
street.
yeah.
But since all the churches are gonna be a special use now,
Right.
we didn't have to do it. We just didn't do it on this last one.
Okay.
So you still haven't, so it's still, it would still be an individual thing. So if you zone me commercial from an AR1, and then would it affect my neighbor at
No.
all?
Nope.
Okay, so they couldn't,
Only the property owner can apply for
Right.
a zoning
and
change.
so then my little piece of property can be flipped around if the board would decide to do that.
Right,
Right.
the council, yeah.
Okay.
So it's got a
So
lot of
does it
hurdles
set
of
precedence?
conformity.
So if you agree to give it to me, and then
It does set a precedence.
Walter
Yeah.
comes in and says, I want it, and you say no to him, now what do we do? I mean, I'm just asking, I'm just trying to follow this train of thought here, where we're going to with
So
this,
then,
you know?
It does set a precedent.
Well, it sounds great to us.
It does set a
because-
precedent.
You have to have a good reason to say no, a really good, not just, we don't want it there.
Yeah.
A really good reason to say no to Walter if they said yes to
Or
it.
else, if you say no to Walter, then he'll sue the city, and, if it's, the reasoning's not sound,
Give a shit if it's
potentially
the
win.
city.
Well,
Got what I
the
wanted.
reason this is attractive to us right now is because we're going from GCC one to UR1 or
Right, exactly.
Village Historic, whatever the heck we're going to. Yeah, it sounds great, but I guarantee, like I said, there's probably some guy who owns like 5 houses in there thinking it's probably right on the fringe of, back there on Track Street or somewhere, and they're probably thinking, oh, well, I was gonna do this or that, and
Yeah.
they're not gonna want it. Now, if a block of homeowners came in, let's say there's 100 properties in there, and 85 of the homeowners come in and say, yeah, I want this to be residential, can we redo the whole thing?
I would have to check with the legal.
I
Well, you
don't,
said, see, you went from it, now
Because
you're going
with
from,
annexation though, if there's 20 properties and, 15 people come in and say, yeah, we want to annex,
but now you're
you'd
going
be
from,
annexed down that
now
block.
you're going from
That's what Andrew was trying to-
individual to
My wife
group.
was trying to do.
I mean, you're taking I don't want my property to be changed, but you're going from individual to group now if you had that many, even if it is the majority of people.
Right.
You've trying to flip things around a little bit here now,
That
You're
makes
taking
it-
away my individualism to say no, because you have a group of 85 out of 100 saying they want it, and I don't want it.
They still couldn't change
That's
yours.
that's the
Well, that's what he's
double-edged sword.
that's what he's saying, say right there, that he'd like to see we'll do the whole
That's the
thing.
double-edged sword of zoning.
Right.
That
You
is-
know.
That would actually be a taking, And there is certain conditions where taking can be done. I've seen it done right here in Johnstown.
Yeah, but you have to bring in legal and
Right.
possibly
Right.
a lot of money.
Right, so that's what I'm
And
saying, if
drag 'em.
every one of those property owners in that block does not walk in and say, yes, I want this,
The
that's
Dake-
when you have a
The
problem.
Dake property on Track Street was a junkyard. That was
Yeah.
taking, so, to make it light manufacturing.
Well, that whole area, yeah, that whole area from the get-go is just, a lot of it was a mess. Some of it still is a mess.
It's better.
It's
Yeah,
better than
and some
was.
things had to happen to clean it up. They had to.
Yeah.
Luckily, this area is a lot more defined. Now, if we did decide to change that, though, what would the mechanism for that be? Do we send a letter to everybody and just say there's a zoning change consideration on your property, or how do we do that?
They'd all have to apply, I would think, right? It wouldn't be like we're proposing.
Well, it's not like
something.
annexation where I can't recruit,
I mean, you can
but
Just
send,
like
no, you can
Albany
send
did.
a letter to people if you want and just say, hey, we're open, we'd like to rezone this, and if you're open to that, we'll waive your zoning fee. And you don't have to show up for a public meeting.
New Albany
But you need to
just
be
did
prepared that
45
people are gonna say
properties.
no.
yeah.
And they put a sign in every property's yard of a zoning change had been proposed, and they sent them a letter.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kind of resistance or kickback.
And then if we adopt if we adopt 3 more new districts and we get into the same problem elsewhere, are we gonna do the same process over and over again?
That's what
I
I'm,
mean.
that's what I wanna talk about. What would the process look like on that? Cause that's what I'm saying. That's what the process would look like, right? Yeah. So do you just do the easy route and rename it and make sure that it's zoned the same way and hope no businesses come in there and bulldoze houses? Cause that's what you're hoping for right now. It hasn't happened for 100 years in the most part, or whatever.
Change now.
Yeah. I mean, you have what in that group there? You have what? KSEPs is in there, right?
Yep.
So KSEPs
pizza
is in
place.
there. You have
The pizza place.
The pizza place. You have, I don't know if it's in there, but like that Stigler power, you know, where they sell the mowers.
College,
Is that in that section there?
yeah, it's in
So there you go. There's already 3 businesses that are right in that section that would have a problem with you changing the zoning.
And that building there's in contract to be sold too, that whole building is,
Which one?
where the Stigler,
They're actually light manufacturing.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
LM district.
Oh, they're okay. Because I was going to say I didn't know where exactly they're in light manufacturing, so that's not going to change. But you still have Durco's and KSEPs in there. So that's the only 2 businesses in that GCC one.
Yes,
Okay. Now they're luckily they're right there.
Yeah.
in that block.
But all the other.
They're right there close to each other, so
Yeah.
you could spot zone that if
It's,
you really wanted
it's
to.
logical where they're located.
So there is a tool, just, I don't know why I didn't and I get what Ryan's saying, and I think if you want to go down that path, I would concur. That is, leave it where it's at.
Yeah.
And the tool could be that you put design standards in or site requirements that really don't allow for a small lot on an individual basis. So the easiest way to do this is if you have a 2,000 square foot structure, and they want to make it a retail store, then you typically just increase the parking size. And what's gonna happen is they're not gonna be able to meet the parking size, the setbacks. You put up, 5 foot of green space in between each contiguous property. So what you do is you build in these layers that really take a site that's only a half an acre, and it doesn't allow for the development of it to be a commercial entity unless it's for like the existing house, an attorney's office, and he has 4 parking spaces for his clients and himself.
Sort of what we did with the
If
apartments.
you change
Just
that
make it
though,
like
so
for-
now he owns a GCC one and you change the zoning on that to be more restrictive, at what point do you get into taking though?
You're okay with restricting the parking, that's not uncommon, you're okay with increasing the, we did that with a particular dentist office, and said, hey, you've gotta have natural vegetation for screening, and all these other setbacks that go with it to make that process a little bit harder. And what it does is it doesn't allow for that expansion.
Yeah.
Unless somebody buys 3 or 4 lots. That's a scenario that could happen. It's not as probable, and that's, I think, the best outcome you can hope for.
Yeah.
But as far as looking at one identifying lot, restricting the
The risk is low.
Burger King situation to be put in there, I think is pretty high if you go ahead and put in all the other restrictions. And we have a lot of that right now. The one thing you could do is just require a heavier amount of parking.
Yeah.
And also increase the amount of landscaping that will be required. And that's probably gonna take out, I would say, 80% of those
Yeah, I
sites.
agree with that.
And
I think
honest,
that's true for every-
Because I don't
Yeah.
think, I don't think we're gonna have any mass-produced businesses going in. It's gonna be real estate offices, lawyers, chiropractors, stuff like that, dentist office.
And if the current site exists, it's not the end of the world.
that's what I think too. If someone actually bought up a couple, like 2, 3, 4 lots and was gonna do like the second-story residential and first-story commercial, like it is kind of our current downtown, it's almost like an extension of the historic downtown if we got them to do it right, which, you know, I think makes the area walkable and usable, and I think, you know, I'm not, you know, even though I live right there, I'm not opposed to that. I think that could be a cool look. I'm not opposed to,
It's
you know.
cool till it's next to your house.
Well, I think you hit.
That's how it
the key word
goes.
is doing it right. And that is, if it's in a historic district, and maybe this is where we look at overlay districts to maybe intensify the restrictions that exist in that particular area. So you could simply say any commercial structure that goes up in this GCC 1 has to be 1905 historically referenced in the characteristics and the architecture of it. And that gives you some clear examples of, okay, you got a 2-story, or you've got to maintain the house structure that's there. You can't come in with a modernized, you know,
yeah.
Yeah.
situation. So
And
doing it right is probably the key word.
Well, another problem too, if you wanna, take a house and put an apartment above it, the fire code restrictions now is phenomenal. The Blankenmeyers who are doing the bourbon bar here at Pratt, they've run into a real mess. Bailey and I've been working with them. I actually even talked to the county. We tried to help him out, but we couldn't get anywhere. He's got to put in a very elaborate, very expensive fire system. Plus, he has to have, he has a 2-car garage that's going to go in off of Pratt. Well, the opening's there now, and that has to have a wet sprinkler system in it because there's people living above it.
Well, yeah, and he's doing a restaurant on the bottom, so that's even worse.
It's really very, very expensive
Yeah.
to do what he's doing.
Yeah, if he was doing a general office or something down there, they'd probably be a little more.
Different, yeah.
Yeah, but a restaurant and a garage where you're gonna park cars, they're gonna nail you on that. Yeah. So that's interesting.
And the reason Bailey brought that up is because this current draft is not in harmony with the comment that she just brought up. You have some situations where if you were to adopt this particular document, you're gonna run into some headwinds with what's being presented and what is allowed. And like I said, I gotta get.
How'd we get there? We didn't pick that up.
do we have
while
any
were going through
examples of do we have any examples of where the contradictions are?
it? That's one of them right
Yours.
there.
It's one of them.
Yeah.
The AR1 that we would not want there.
Well, we didn't, and our current zoning code update didn't rezone those areas, right?
That's what she's saying. It's gonna change the use from
I'm
what it
saying that
currently
if
is.
you pass the code, you're gonna have to pass a new zoning map.
Yeah.
And if you pass a new zoning map, you need to look at every single property and make sure that you're not invalidating their current zoning.
Right.
I guess I'm still a little unclear on what, if we pass a new zoning map, it would be the same as the old one because we can't change any zoning. Can we?
Yeah, so,
Be a nightmare.
We
you know,
didn't
you have
really
some
did.
new zoning districts
Change the
that
zoning law.
won't be used, so why pass them?
Yeah.
So.
Oh, because we added a few, didn't we?
Brian's not gonna like to hear this, but I'm basically saying that you should edit your current zoning.
Yeah.
our draft that we've been working on.
No.
No.
The current zoning. The way that you just passed an AR1 update, that's what you should do for every district currently.
Yeah, so
GCC,
take
UR1,
everything we did for the last
UR2.
year.
Also, don't try to pass the whole plan at once.
That's,
Well, you know,
that's
honestly,
that's why I didn't like it.
we have our
do all that
drafts, the
work.
changes we've made, and honestly, like, I don't think it would ever get I don't think council would ever pass this thing. We gave it to him in one document
I
anyway.
think that over the next 3 months,
Starts thinking.
exactly what you did tonight with AR1, in 2 weeks, I'm gonna send you a PUD. Do it section by section, but we're not gonna, because we can't. And like, Old Village Residential isn't a thing. We can put in special use and ask this, that'll be a lot easier, ask the schools. We own government. But
But that's not gonna be the same, yeah, that's not.
there's
gonna
no
be the
way
same
we
scenario
can
the rest
pass
of
this
them.
whole code and enforce every district because we can't change people's. I
Right.
mean, you know, you can change the name. If you want to change the name from Village Commercial to, I don't know, Commercial .5,
Right.
whatever, you can do that. But you can't change the uses.
Which ones did we have the most conflict on? Do you remember?
I think the most conflict is, it's not going to be the residential, it's going to be the GCCs,
Okay.
AR multifamily, and probably Old Village Residential.
Yeah, cause I think commercial district wise, and this is where I gotta get my eyes on this a little bit more in depth. Limited business district, general commercial district, and village center district, are those the only three? Or is there more?
No.
We have VC, yeah, Village Center.
Okay, so, right now we got GCC one, GCC two,
Right. Village Commercial.
and village commercial, so where do these all fit at whenever you've essentially lessened the options? And then I don't think you want your GCC one, and I'd like to just pull back, let's get to the higher view of this. And I know this seems very focused and funneled to what we currently have, but in the grand scheme of things, let's take this thing 30 years down the road. What we're working on here is important to the existing, but we've also got to get some stuff in place for the unannexed areas that are gonna be annexed to
Yeah.
Johnstown. And I don't wanna see a GCC one or a GCC two utilized in any annexation to come into Johnstown. And right now, we don't have any other thing on the books for that to occur, and even if we adopted this. So that's where I think we're trying to get to in the quickest way possible is to get some districts, work with this the best we can, but then start focusing on some bigger agenda items that are gonna be coming down the pipeline.
Basically, instead of passing a whole new code, when we kind of need a stronger code tomorrow, yesterday, address the parts of our code right now that we need to strengthen.
One each meeting.
Yeah.
And is that
Yeah.
every single section, you know, we've talked a lot about a lot of things, but like we had a whole meeting on the buffering and landscape
We had a whole
chapter.
year of zoning and then we're gonna burn it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think
That's a lot of work.
You just need
I know it is.
we need to prioritize what's going to have the most immediate effect on us.
Well, right, and I'm really worried that if we pass this code that you have in front of you right
Right.
now, one, council isn't gonna pass it, and two, as soon as Intel is done, or even before then, 6 months from now, it's out of date.
Yeah.
And so, if we're gonna bring somebody in here to update our comprehensive plan, maybe we should address the most pressing issues of our current zoning code that's on the books right now.
So bringing people in to do our comprehensive plan and whatever we do, I mean, they were talking about 4 month process.
And that's short.
I know,
most
because
people
I
say
was
8 to
laughing
10
when they said,
months.
I laughed when they said 4 months, because I said, they haven't met us. I mean, we got this how long ago?
But at the
I mean,
same time-
how long ago did we get this zoning? 2 years ago.
At the same time,
And we're still going
developers
through it.
call us every single day
Yeah.
and ask us about
Oh,
our
I know.
comprehensive plan.
That's what I was saying. That's why I wanted to pass this through and then we can come back, because I agree with you. We need better than what we had, because that's out of date, and it doesn't work with our design review very
I know.
well at all.
I know.
So that's a major problem. It looks bad, I mean, the whole time with Ace. Now luckily, we did the COA on Ace, but, dealing with Ace and dealing with Bell Store, they're going back and forth between zoning and design review, and they don't work. And our design review board, they're caught in the middle. They're new. I mean, this is their first COA they've gone through.
Correct me if I'm going wrong here, Bailey. So let's take GCC one, for example, because it's obviously in the historic district. What you can do is you can put in a historic overlay district to that.
Right.
And what that would allow you to do is take some design components, and then as you mentioned before, Ryan, it's always the more restrictive. Well, if you put in that historic district site, for instance, I'm gonna use the Bell Store as an example. In that historic, you just find that you want that sucker on the road or however setback you want. That's gonna be defined in that historic district, so that will supersede whatever your GCC one says.
Right.
So you can
And
do.
you don't have to change your zone.
And you don't have to change the zoning, you just need to put in a historic overlay district. And I would advocate that that may be the most beneficial because your GCC one, you don't want it everywhere else. And so maybe this is a good way to get it to a historic overlay district, you just plop it right there. GCC two would be the same way, you could probably identify that, but that's a tool in the toolbox that you could use to achieve what I think you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we can go in and look at GCC 1 and 2 a lot faster than this zoning is gonna be approved, than this draft zoning
Well,
document.
yeah, because if we pass this today, let's say council loved it, you're a month before it goes into effect, 2 months before it goes into effect, because you have to have a reading and a second reading, and then it gets voted on, and then it takes a month to go. Yeah, so we're 2 months. That's why I was saying at the beginning of all this, we gotta be quick and get this passed, because it's gonna be 2 months, and we're already into July.
And then there's a lot of legal questions
That's-
about
that's
what we
the-
can enforce.
What Bailey's saying is even if the council passes this is probably not gonna pass the legal challenge that's gonna come with it. And I'm not trying to be the bearer of bad news, but that's,
Might be too restrictive on the sizing, I think.
well, it's not necessarily that, it's just what we just talked about, it's the taking. If you institute this, you're doing a lot of rezoning, and that's where you're gonna be met with legal challenges. And you may get through all those, but that's gonna be a longer process.
Because we eliminated some of the old zoning districts and created new ones.
Trouble was, we came into this, I mean, our
Why do we do that?
board's unique here. We came into this looking at zoning, and then we see how our current zoning gets applied and enforced, and it doesn't do the job that we wanted it to do. So that's why we got really restrictive on everything.
I disagree with you.
And that's how we ended up here is we said, wait a minute, we come with this zoning stuff and it doesn't get applied how we wanted it to. We got really restrictive. We went the other way on it. So that's how we ended up here, but I agree with you. If there's gonna be legal issues, as much as I don't wanna throw a year's worth of work away,
I don't think that we necessarily have to throw it away. I mean, what if I brought in GCC 1, not in 2 weeks, because we'll probably
Yeah.
bring in PUD, but let's look at those PUD suggestions we made. Let's line them up, but let's take those PUD comments that you've
Yeah.
already made and just put them right into what we already have.
yeah, I'd say PUD signage. What were the other big arguments that we had? Like
I mean,
what we
open
spent the
space, we
most.
talked about a lot. Let's
Yeah,
just
open
take
space,
it
we
and
talked
put
a
it
lot,
in what we
yeah.
have.
Yeah.
So don't throw it away,
It's
and
not a
I'm not gonna
waste.
throw it away.
Well,
Yeah.
you've done the legwork, now you just gotta take it.
Let's just
and then
basically
implement it into where you want it.
Reword it to what we already have.
Plus, you learned a lot while you were
We learned a lot.
Well, that's kind of my general feeling is,
Domestic issues of not getting home on time.
Yeah, we created domestic issues. We learned a lot.
so the other thing that
Yeah.
we don't have to redo everything, I wouldn't think. Like a lot of this stuff, the first sections is like procedural stuff, appeals, variances, fees, like we went through all these sections. Those sections we might not necessarily need to go through.
Yeah.
And we can take, let's start with all the zoning districts.
Those I don't think it would hurt to go through those. So we might not have to, do you think we should go through the whole thing or just the zoning districts?
I mean,
like, section 1 is administrative body, section 2 is the
Probably
certificate
not.
procedure, section 3 is the
Your
subdivision
most pressing
procedures.
thing right now is the zoning districts. And if somebody turns in an application tomorrow for AR1,
Yeah.
what you guys just passed isn't gonna work.
Yeah.
It's not gonna
For a
hold
month.
firm. Right,
We got a month.
so, if-
Well, first it's got to go to council, 2 readings, right?
right, so
and
our
then a
biggest,
month.
You
our
can do it by
biggest,
emergency.
yeah.
Yeah, but will it pass the emergency?
Teresa, do you
We
have-
tried to do that with water and it didn't work.
do you have the definition of emergency? So it has to do with the, I can't remember the wording
If the
on it.
wording is put in to the sections,
It has to be to the detriment of the village of Johnstown, to the reasoning of why you have to do it as an emergency.
you'd have to establish that.
You have to establish the reason you're doing it as an emergency.
Yeah.
I think there are some legitimate arguments. I don't want to talk about them now. I think that's probably a discussion for council, since they're
Right.
the ones that have to face that. And then also getting with the village manager. Obviously, it's a service issue and where we're at with our current services. And
There's a lot of things tied to it.
there's a lot of things that maybe we could tie to it, maybe we couldn't, but I don't want to give you a definitive now whether it could be by emergency or not. That's going to be a greater conversation that we can probably have next week.
I believe it can be, it just needs to be articulated
Yes.
very well in the sections of the ordinance.
And we are running into some capacity issues.
Yeah.
Currently with record volumes being utilized every day, so I think there is the justification for some of these things to come online to be a little bit more restricted because of some of the things we're facing with our infrastructure, so.
And we think that the most pressing things, if a developer calls us, they wanna talk about multifamily or they wanna talk about PUD. So that's why we sent multifamily tonight and we're
Yeah.
gonna send PUD here soon. And then, maybe you guys decide that GCC is the next pressing item. To get GCC up to date with the design codes, let's maybe do that next.
Yeah, I mean, because we know within city limits or annexation, you're gonna get neighborhoods first. And then if anything else happens, it's gonna happen down the edge of 62 towards Duncan Plains.
So if you're wanting to pivot away from the GCC one and do, I would recommend a completely new commercial district zoning classification and write the regulations for that. If you're worried
Yeah.
about new annexation, that may be your next pressing issue, we could focus on that. I would, however, recommend that that's where, if we're outsourcing some of this comprehensive plan zoning stuff, I know what I don't know, and I always lean on a heavier resource individual or company.
Yeah.
That's gonna give me really, really good information. They may be able to identify a plan, and I think I've heard it the last couple meetings that I was at. You guys have a vision, you can give them that vision, and then they can draft it.
Well, that's what I said. I'd rather, because they kept saying the whole time, you have this plan, you have that plan. We'll go through it and give it back to you. And I said, why don't I just go through it and give it to you? I think that'd be quicker.
So there's some things that you could do, so that you're not trying to create this thing on your own. I think getting outside help to establish your next commercial district is probably gonna be the best way to go, only because they're really qualified probably to do what they do.
Right.
And if you can say, this is what we want, I heard, gosh, what was it, up in Westerville, you guys referenced that a lot.
Yeah.
And if that's the path that you wanna go, then you give them that template and they say, okay, and then they come back and you say, this is everything I wanted, great.
That's what I mean. I think we can come up, we can create the rough framework of a plan and hand it to a design company and get closer to what we want. Because what I've seen since I've started here is, I mean, mostly I've inherited a plan that somebody else started, but we pick it apart for a couple months, end up with something that we're okay with, and then wonder why we spent all that money.
Right.
So I think it'd be easier to create something, at least the rough framework, hand it to them, get back something that looks similar to what we wanted, and then pick it apart.
And I mentioned that to design review tonight, and you guys should be thinking about it too, and that is an overarching theme, and I use the reference of brick or hardy back or stucco or whatever you want it to be, but some of the other areas, even Westerville's incorporated this, and Dublin, and I'm not saying you have to emulate that, but there is an overarching theme that exists throughout their design. And if you're looking at a commercial district, what do you want it to look like? And that's for you to decide, that's for you to come up with. But if you can give them some direction, I think they can come back with something that's consistent, instead of everything being kind of on its own and everything kind of being different. You turn the corner, you go down this street, it's different. You turn the corner, you go down the next street, it's different. Now, I'm not saying everything has to be the same, but there needs to be some harmony in the plan that's produced, whether it be commercial, residential.
That's yeah, exactly. I totally agree. That's the challenge. It's like, is harmony, right? How you get the right standards with the design review board in particular, right? That's the big
I
challenge.
mean, we don't want to go Georgian architecture and white fence everywhere, but we want to
The
give
rural.
some latitude in there, and I think that's why when you say, like you said, you can get brick, you can get hardy board, you can get steel siding, you can get some EFS here and there, and there you go.
Yeah, what do you guys want to see implemented on a citywide basis, or at least in certain areas, that way there is some consistencies amongst those. It gets you away from the individual building that exists, and I think you're gonna be happier with the plan if it's based on a larger concept rather than on an individual, okay, this looks good on this 100 acres, let's move on to the next 50 acres, and then you got another concept plan. I think you guys need to identify, and it could be, you got Ace, and you got Granville Milling, and you got Troyers that have taken on more of a country feel with that commercial style. I don't know if that's where you want to navigate or not. I'm just using that as an example. But then you start to carry that pattern throughout what you're doing, and that will define, okay, if you're going for a more rural characteristic design in your commercial areas, well then, if you're saying rural, then that means more green space identified in your areas. Maybe it's certain types of trees and placements of those trees, and maybe it's, I'm not gonna say fences, but maybe it's the certain type of pitches, or gables that you have, and they are all somewhat consistent upon the larger picture. So just think about that. I think that's gonna come up hopefully in the next, next year or so. We'll try to define that, so.
Where's Ron when we need him?
Hey, if we have a spot on design review, that's what I said. Ron would have been great for it. That's what I told him in the beginning.
We do have a spot on design review.
We do have a spot. That's what I was gonna say, because
I've emailed the mayor to see how he wants to proceed
Yeah.
with either advertising or appointing or what, so.
yeah,
I'm waiting for an answer from him.
that's what I told Ron, because I know he's busy, and I said that's less of a time. That's less time than this is. Maybe not in the next year. We'll see, because everything's gonna get overhauled. So what do you guys want to do? I mean, where are we at with this zoning code? And if it's gonna have tremendous legal issues and stuff like that,
Every
I
month.
mean,
How big is the PUD document that we're looking at? It's 23 pages.
It's less than that, it's like 13 pages.
So obviously, coming in the next week, it's gonna be a bigger document you're gonna have to examine. So I don't know if you wanna save your energies and resources towards that, or if you wanna dive into this tonight. I'm indifferent, but I'm just trying to have you look ahead to see what you're gonna be getting into.
all right.
Well, my opinion.
I think we should go ahead and move to pass part 1 and 2 from our draft and knock those out since we've already done it. And that's not gonna, I don't think anything's gonna change.
I think that might be a bad idea,
No?
because you
Yeah.
reference later parts of the code, so if you don't pass those parts, then the parts that you want to pass tonight won't match up.
Well, like administrative bodies and their duties, it's not gonna, I don't think those reference like any particular zoning
Okay.
zoning certificate
If you don't-
procedures. That doesn't really, like, this is just subdivision procedures. Application for plats, that kind of stuff. Amendments,
pass those
appeals and
through as-
variance procedures. Like, we spend a lot of time on those too. Fees and violations, So those are the sections that I'm saying pass, is the first 40 pages or so. I don't think that those would have any conflict with what we do later. We can go through and,
We can pass those as their own amendment, though.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We don't have to.
Just push those up to council right now, and then we can start, and then we'll push, one.
Basically, we
one
can
other
take out the
section at a
parts
time.
that are gonna have legal issues and pass through the rest as their own amendments.
Well, I wouldn't send definitions. I would
No, we
leave
can't send definitions, you're right.
Yeah, definitions will be all screwed up if you're not doing the whole thing.
Don't send purpose and organization.
So, I mean, we can change our rules and procedure.
Why don't you just let me write this up to match with our current code?
Okay.
Because all the sections are numbered differently and.
Right.
All right, fair
so
enough,
I'll
fair
do
enough.
that.
I'm not like, I always, my personal opinion is that our draft could use a redraft, because we know a lot more now than we did when we first
Well,
started.
that's why I said
you
we're
know, so,
completely different people from when we started this.
We started, we
'Cause
were all pretty new, and
half of the zoning board, I mean, well, we're pretty much like we are now. So,
yeah.
I mean, we're
we
pretty
were
much
making
like
stuff
we are
up as we
now.
went along.
So, you learned a lot more as you went.
I think the nice thing, and a positive if you want to take away, because I know there's some defeat to the conversation, and that is, what you guys just did tonight, you made a really big impact on the AR1 for the future of Johnstown. So that happened really quickly, and that's gonna be the same success that you're gonna have next week and the week after that. And so, I know you guys built up for the last 4 years working on this, but in that time, did anything actually get established? No. What you did tonight, that was, you could get it
You
through.
know,
That
the
was-
funny thing is that,
It's kind of just taking what you worked on and putting it into smaller pieces.
and we wanted to go through it
Easier to
all.
digest.
And council, it's gonna be a lot easier for council to digest,
Right.
which I was always skeptical that we'd ever get. It's gonna take a year for them to go through and pick apart anyway. Well, now that you're
How
done,
long,
it might
how
have been
quick did
easier,
they
but-
pass the design review? That
Send it
was,
back to you.
they sent it back, but we
wasn't too
sent
bad.
it,
It
we
wasn't too bad,
reviewed it
right.
and sent it back again. So, I mean, there was only like 3 meetings there and then it
We had
passed.
a
but
work session.
This is, yeah, we had that work session, which we do with this too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that we couldn't get it past that. Should we, so this is my other thought, since we just went through signs, should we push signs up?
Let me type signs into our,
Because I think that's
Just
one
into
we're all
the-
friends.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty good on signs.
I would like to get that one off the
Slash, I
table,
don't ever want
because-
to talk about that again.
Right. That's
Until
the
they
one-
invent new types of signs.
These other ones, okay,
I
the
don't
first
wanna
ones,
talk about it again.
I agree that it's been so long since we looked at them, that we probably could look at them again. I'm not opposed to that, but signs is one I think we could go ahead and, I'd like to push up if we can. And then,
I agree with the time spent on signs and things, but I think we got more pressing issues with the potential usage and things. So I'm kind of concurring with Bailey's thought as far as using what you've put together with the new code, using that for guidance and template, and then modifying the existing code until we can get a better plan. I think
That's what
this
we're
is a good.
saying.
could we push up
Signs is
signs as
easily
well?
digestible because we just did it.
I think it's
So we could
important
write-
too.
We could just change what we already have.
Well, but does it apply to the new zoning districts? Would you not have to change
yeah,
it?
I need to make sure that all the
Right.
writing says our current zoning
Right.
districts. Instead of
That's-
you sending a sign code that references zoning districts that don't exist.
It's true.
So let's assign us one, we'll assign us what PUDs this week, and maybe you can go through.
PUDs the next
and-
meeting.
And then
Yeah.
maybe you can go through signs and we can get that done in the background, since I don't think it's gonna require us to take a look at it, since we just took a look at
I
it.
just need
but
to
You'll have to,
rename-
you'll have to adapt some things, I think.
Yeah, like if it says OVR, I'll have to get rid of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
does that sound fair enough?
So for next time we meet, we're going to do PUD and signs.
I'm gonna bring signs probably the meeting after that, because I think PUD is gonna take you some time.
Don't you want to do
There's
signs?
gonna be a lot of conversation, and fortunately, you mentioned Ron Dane, he happened to be a part of the document that is gonna be presented. And there's some visual examples that can be tagged along with it, but for conversation's sake, I don't want you guys to overanalyze it. I do would wanna see us get it on the books, and then if you wanna revisit it later, that mindset, I would argue we've gotta get it on the books sooner than later, so if it's not an exact product, fine, but if we can get through that document the next meeting, that'd be really good, but there's gonna be a lot of conversations, and it's probably gonna revolve around densities, green space, types of designs, and that's conservation design, that's boulevard streeting, that's incorporation of parklands and things of that nature whenever you're looking at PUD. So those are some things that I think you guys are gonna have a lot of questions. I think
That's what most of our conversations are about.
Yeah, so-
Density,
PUDs
density and
are-
rural character.
PUDs are really
That's the,
confusing.
So it's gonna be laid
zoning
out,
districts.
and I think you guys
Both.
are gonna have some conversations and
I wanted to
questions,
get your
but I
signs
think
in
at the
here,
end of it,
buddy.
you're gonna
You
say,
gotta fight for it.
this is at
I'm
least
on
what
your
we're
side.
thinking.
Let's do it.
And then we can navigate through there, so it shouldn't be too long, usually a PUD would take multiple meetings, but I think the template that's in place is a decent working draft.
I think we're pretty much where we want to be on PUD. There might be some new ideas or things that we want, but we hashed that out pretty thoroughly. Didn't we?
Your current PUD draft, I haven't looked at it, it's only what, 1 page or 2
Well,
pages?
let's set it.
Uh-huh.
Let's just set it, so we're just gonna do PUD.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's
5
good, I mean, I
pages,
just,
5 pages.
so I'm not gonna review
So what
anything
we're
else, I'm
looking
just gonna
at-
review
Yeah.
PUD.
Okay.
I think 20, right?
So let's move on.
It's like
I'm
13.
moving
Okay,
forward.
sorry. I'm way-
Talked about
way
this
off.
long enough.
Right.
I just
I'd like
edited
to establish
the,
that.
I edited
We
the,
need to figure that out sooner
I made
than
it
later
look
with the-
like our current zoning
Design
does,
review.
if that makes sense, like change
I
the
think
I don't know
you're
how
right.
you do that.
font.
What are you saying?
So it was 23, so I'm not misquoting.
I'd like to establish a theme sooner than later with
Yeah.
the design. I feel like that's,
Well, it would make us easier for us to know that when what's gonna be coming at us, that how it's gonna fit into zoning itself. You know, I mean, we're not gonna do the design, but if they're gonna say, yes, this is the kind of building you gotta build, now can we make it fit into our zoning thing?
Yeah, to his point that now that we split off the design review and we put those standards out there, I think it's gonna be their job to update the design stuff to make it all try to be consistent, and they have a lot of work to do on that, but I don't think that that's necessarily gonna be one of our focuses.
As long as they,
We took that job away from ourselves in the last session.
as long as they stay away from
I think
zoning,
that-
I think that's appropriate. I mean, like I heard tonight, you know, they were willing to
So
change the actual setbacks and
But did
stuff.
they,
you know, and I'm
the
thinking,
setbacks
wait
that
a
they agreed to tonight, it didn't require a variance then, Bailey, right? It was still
Zoning setbacks
in compliance
Right.
with the
with the
zoning.
zoning.
Okay.
minute.
So what they go
So
with,
they can do
what
whatever they
setbacks
want.
did they go with
So
tonight?
we zone it, see.
And they allowed the parking in front.
Well, once we make the setback requirements for that zone, every building that comes in has the same guidelines. And so as long as they meet the guidelines that we set, like 30-foot setbacks or whatever, we'll never even see that plan. We don't ever, unless they need a variance,
Cause they're permitted use.
the whole
Well,
process.
the argument tonight was, what's the minimum? They said that, what was it, the strictest, or what do you wanna call it, the most severe? That's what they were talking about. But we had said 40 feet, and they wanted to do something else
It's
different.
15, probably.
Yeah, they wanted to go to 15.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's what I mean. So in other words, you know,
Current zoning was 40, and then the design guidelines or design standards they
Right.
were 15.
and so, you know, we shouldn't be arguing tonight,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying that we should set the standard, and then that's what should.
Well, like I said, if the design standard is 15, that's where it goes to the more stringent. So at
It has to be
15
40 unless
40.
they come.
or 40. 40 is what
So
zoning
even though
says.
Yeah.
even though the
Yeah.
design,
More
and
stringent.
that's part of the
Unless you wanna go back into the
contradictions that
document
we were
and
talking
change
about
Right,
before.
that's what I'm
The
saying.
plans don't mesh that well.
Right.
Which is
Which
what
isn't
we.
what we said. We
Because
said
that's a
the most
pretty big
stringent
difference, like
zoning.
the design review, the design.
That's what I mean. They gotta.
So we should go back
standards
in, I mean,
ask
if
for
you have
15
15
foot,
there,
but
then
our
go
zoning
back in
says
and
40
just say
feet.
your overlay
So
district
Yeah.
takes precedence.
the way that the two rules
what's the
meld
current
is
setback
that
on that
our
building that
rules
they did?
supersede their rules.
40.
So it has to
Oh,
be
they did
40.
No, it's
40.
more than 40.
If they want to be
Because they're
closer than
parking in
40, then they gotta come to
They
us
do
for
two
a
rows or
variance,
one row?
which we would probably give if, you know, we thought, obviously, because we made the design.
That was
review board
unclear
too.
with them.
If we thought the 15 looked good,
Right.
we would probably, you know, if we had that in mind. But there's a lot of, because the zoning code has these zoning districts, and the design plan has like
Overlay district.
overlay districts that are
Overlay,
different. There's a lot of work to be done, and ironing out to get everything to meld. More so, I think, for them, well, that'll be a lot more work for them to focus on. I think ours is gonna be focusing on just hashing out what we want our
Well, whatever
zones to be,
whatever they
right?
end up, we have to have a
Nuts and
work
bolts.
session with them
Yeah.
to make
Yeah.
sure they match.
That's
'cause
the thing.
We can't have two competing designs in
Or
Johnstown.
say that the overlay district takes precedence.
Yeah.
So PUD
So if
next
you're
thing.
GCC one and not in an overlay district, then you follow GCC one. If you're GCC one and you're in an overlay district like Bell Stores,
Right.
you can say your overlay district takes precedence. But then you need to make sure that all of the requirements in the overlay district are okay with zoning, are okay, that those will take precedence.
That kind of, if we say in here that you can have a 40-foot setback, but then the overlay says 15, but we've already said, yeah, that's 40, now it goes over to design. and
No, if you say that the overlay district takes precedence, then it's 15.
So then they would never need a variance from us. Pretty much. They would have a variance from the
That's a lot.
design review board? Or no?
They would follow the 15-foot setback.
Right.
What if they wanted to get an exception? What would the process be? I'm just trying to think through logistics.
Yeah, then they'd have to say, we don't want to do 15-foot.
They could, but there wouldn't be, it wouldn't necessarily need a variance because the design review can't give variances, so they would just agree to let them not follow the
Agree to
standard.
modify their document.
Well, that's what I said. That's why I thought zoning or the design review should probably go first on the docket when they come through.
Well,
Because
that's
if
how
your
Bell
design,
Stores is doing it.
well, that's what I mean. So and then Bell Stores came to zoning before they went to design review.
For
Right,
their variance.
For the variance, and that's what I'm saying. So we gave them the variance.
Right.
And then if they'd have went to design review and
But not
design
on their
review said
building,
it should, well, not on the building, on the
their
canopy.
on the
Canopy.
canopy.
Yeah. But if design review would have said, no, that's not right, you gotta move that back, then
That's
our,
right.
our meeting was a waste of time, so we billed them extra.
No, because right now it says zoning is the most stringent.
With the 40-foot, we're the most stringent.
Current wording is zoning is the most stringent. If you wanna switch that to design review, then you can change that to design review, and then we could have flipped it tonight and said, nope, now you gotta meet this criteria, but currently the
Yeah.
wording on the books from a legal standpoint is zoning is the most stringent. If you wanna change that, then we can flip it to design.
So their zoning
Something-
variance stands regardless.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they didn't move the canopy, they weren't moving the
they
canopy at
didn't.
all, so it didn't really matter on
There's
this
sort
one,
of,
but-
it works, it's tough both ways because it's hard for us to approve the variance without knowing what the plan's gonna be.
That's what I'm saying, that's why this,
But it's
that's
hard
why
for
the COA
they
should
can't
come
make a
first.
plan.
Cause then we know what the
Oh,
building's gonna look like, and then if they decide in the COA, well, man, I gotta shift this whole thing over here, okay, you need a variance. Alright, so we go to zoning for the variance, zoning turns it down, and you gotta go back.
Yeah.
So, I think that's how it should, I think that it should work that way, it makes a lot more sense to work that way.
Well, we shouldn't have it, give it to them, then they go to design, and design says no, and then we've already been to us. So
Yeah.
now we gotta get them to come back, if we wanna give them.
And you bill them again,
And yeah,
and their architect bills them again.
Right.
And that's what I mean, that's,
yeah,
That's-
I mean,
I'd
that's
be
what I'm
pissed.
getting at, you know, you're
What's
not
the counter
making,
argument to that?
not making it good for the people that wanna
I
do
know
the
you thought
stuff,
it was,
you know?
you thought it should,
I told them they could do whatever they wanted.
so you think you'd be all right with it going to them first and then coming to us for the variance second?
Well, they're two separate applications.
they are, but I'm saying,
Like
if you were the business, you would, I mean, me
Well,
personally,
you're-
I'd
so
rather
legally-
figure out,
Legally, if someone turns in a variance application, I have to send it to you within a certain time frame.
Okay.
Even if I think that their COA should go to design review and get approval first, legally, if they submit their variance application, I have to send it to you.
Okay. So we
regardless.
probably,
What do
so
we have to do?
we don't have, we
You
didn't
can
have to approve the variance
table
that
it.
day. We should have tabled it.
But we
until
can't
they got
have,
their COA.
that's what I'm saying,
But they
maybe,
have to agree then to table it if it's beyond, if it's outside the timeline.
but that's what I'm
Which
saying,
they
there's
will do
no,
because
there's
we'll
no,
say we're gonna
is there
deny
an
it unless you
established
can't agree
framework?
to
So
table it.
business comes to you and says, I wanna
So
build this
it was kind of our
business.
we
No,
can
they
control
just
that
have to
process
get
a little
both
bit.
before they can get their zoning certificate.
Right, but and it doesn't matter which, but there's no framework that
All this
says,
crazy
it'd be a
procedural
better
stuff,
idea
just-
for you to get the COA first. That's what I mean, we should do that.
I can
how
just
much-
tell them that, but then they can make
How
whatever
much do you
decision
want
they
to
want.
make them have to pay
Yeah.
their people
I would
to
tell
do
them that.
this?
That's what I'm saying, though.
The catch-22 is that
I mean,
if
really,
they don't get their
people
variance
can apply for
first,
whatever they want,
then
right?
Well, they
they get
can,
the
but,
COA.
you
I mean,
know,
that doesn't mean it'll be approved, but
review
you
it.
Yeah.
can
What-
apply
and
and
we say,
then,
"Now you're not
well, like
getting
stuff
your
that
variance,"
comes
and
to
they gotta
planning and
start all
zoning, I
over.
always
So
tell
they might
people
have to
it might
start
not
all
pass
over
planning
either
and zoning.
way.
Sure.
But
Right.
So it's kind of a
even if I don't think
catch-22.
it'll pass, I have to
Just
send
hate
it
to
to
see
you.
oh, for sure, yeah.
But I know how.
Yeah, but I
felt
would
really
just, that's what I'm saying, I think
unsure
there
about
should
giving
be a
that variance
mechanism in
on a
place
plan
that says,
wasn't a final plan.
COA
They hadn't
first.
got their COA. They hadn't done the
Yeah.
truck turns and this and that.
all right, so our agenda for the next meeting, let's get to
PUD.
that.
Let's get out of here.
PUD, right?
PUD is gonna be on there,
Okay.
for sure.
We'll try to get you guys that, at least that document, maybe not the agenda, but a little bit ahead of time before Friday.
That's
That way
fine.
You guys can put your eyes on it.
Well, you and I are gonna go over it this week. We might be able to get it out by Friday
Love that.
or Monday.
So PUD will be on there, are we putting anything else on there?
I mean, you can, but
You think you can have signs through that fast?
I don't know, let me see.
If we did PUD and signs, I think that would go a long way, because I think that's the two things we argued about for the longest.
we'll see what we do. We're definitely, the PUD is
Priority.
in a good draft state, we'll get with that, and then maybe next week we can start working on signs.
It all depends on what comes up in the next.
Oh,
Right.
Well, we're gonna, wait, hang on, we're gonna get to that after Jim does his report, but we're gonna get to the coming next here soon. But, so for the agenda though, let's do PUD and try to get signs on there?
I'll see what I can do.
Okay. Cause that would make me feel a lot better about what just happened. I don't even wanna talk about it, okay?
I understand
I
completely.
really don't.
I
Okay.
have every right.
It's a lot of work. So, it's like a Lord of the Rings movie. They did all that stuff, and at the end, they just threw that ring in there and went home.
Why would you do that?
All right. So Jim's inspector report. What do you have for us, Jim?
Kind of self-explanatory, total new homes permitted month to date is 31. That's off by, from a year ago, it's probably 25. A lot of factors there, and for April it was only 5. Rest of it was just the amount of permits I've done. There was a lot of inspections, last month I did 21 inspections. And still trying to get through the litter receptacle violations. This week, well, tomorrow would be the day to put some out, the people that haven't returned their cans. And it's working pretty well. I have door hangers, basically, I put on the door.
Okay.
And that gives them instructions. New business updates or just business updates. You know, you guys already know Dunkin Donuts pulled out.
They bailed.
Taco Bell came in, and they say that they have the property in contract. That's what they've told me.
They
Okay.
have not come in for any meetings or
Nothing else.
done any.
Because I got walked back at the city council meeting there.
Yeah, I heard that at the city council.
That's what I was gonna say. I got
Unless
walked
someone
back.
knows something that we don't know, that the realtor has told me that he has it in contract.
I would probably say that your information is
Yeah.
maybe more accurate than.
See, there you go.
Well, I wouldn't probably go around telling people that until we have an application in, which we don't, and they haven't come to meet with us either.
So
Well, they have asked about curb cuts, so that, they did ask that question. Urgent care, which we just dealt with tonight. Armstrong Ceiling, we still haven't got anything from them, on their large addition. and they talked like they were gonna get something into us by June, so I'm not sure. Troyers is planning to add, and I've already done the zoning certificate on this, it's a great big walk-in cooler behind their building where their loading dock's at. And because of the cost of food, all Troyer's products come from Walnut Creek Foods, and Larry can buy food frozen by the pallet, and it'll save him about 10%. So, a coffee shop on Main Street, I think he's gonna be slow to get it up and running. He's doing most of the work himself. Ace Hardware, we approved the COA. Curaleaf Edition, which was all permitted, COA, the whole thing, it's been pulled. And I even had a check in my office for 45 days, and they asked me to destroy the check, which I did. Bell Stores, we have heard his second design review today, and the COA has officially passed. The Hobby and Craft Store, if you haven't been there, it's worth taking a look at. It's very, very nice. It's right there by Dollar Tree.
Okay.
So, the cancellations in there, did they give a reason, or is it
Which one?
the ones that were canceled? So like
Curaleaf,
Curaleaf canceled there,
Donuts,
Armstrong.
Dunkin Donuts, they had a letter of intent.
Well, no, the Dunkin Donuts, I get it.
Okay.
They moved to New Albany, but
Curaleaf, it ended up that the expansion was gonna be more money than they had anticipated, and
Okay.
they decided to try to add additions to some of their other plants in other
To other
locations. Armstrong Ceilings, I don't think is canceled, I think they
wait,
just
no.
haven't finished
Okay.
yet. They just haven't applied yet.
so there was just Curaleaf was the only one. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, you guys passed their COA, I think, last year, and COAs expire, so they'll,
Yep.
if they ever wanna put another addition on, they'll just have to come back.
Yeah, I'd start over.
Dunkin Donuts, I saw at the roundabout there on Hamilton. They have a big sign up now.
But that was
There's
a
one there.
different franchise holder, according to Scott Tallman. He was the
Yeah.
one doing this as a different group than him.
And then I heard
don't know if there's any bearing on him.
well, I heard another one was going to go out by Sheets.
Oh,
out there.
really?
Yeah. So they'll have that Aldi and
That makes
all that
sense.
other stuff.
Yeah.
What happened to Route 62 barbecue? They just closed down the business totally, or did they
Well,
move?
I think the owners of the building wanted to sell the property, and I don't know if there was a disagreement or what, but that was the reason they closed down.
They're not gonna reopen
And
the.
he said the cost of protein, so,
Okay.
but his business was still solid.
Yeah.
He did.
That's why I'm surprised he didn't try to sell the business or relocate the.
Well, he had some people that wanted him, Utica wanted him, they even had a place for him, but
Yeah.
he decided, I think he just wanted to be done with all of it.
Yeah, fair enough.
I threw a couple pictures in there. That's the new sidewalk beside the pond at Concord Crossing West. And this wasn't originally on the print, and I asked Slaybox to do it, and they did it. So HOA wanted it too. Next page is, I got called out by the police department and the fire department.
Is the house ran into a car, or car ran
Yeah.
into a house?
There was a medical emergency with the driver, I think.
Yeah, he ran over a stop sign
Yeah.
on Douglas, dragged it across the street, and he deflected off of a
Yeah.
utility pole. It's boarded up, it's safe right now. A single old lady lives there, she's dealing with the insurance companies. And then the next page is that, I've been dealing with this for 6 months. I have a court date set for the lady.
My sidewalk.
So today, she told me she has a contractor hired to put in a new sidewalk, and I asked her if she would send me some proof of that. The date for installing it is June 23rd. I
Yeah.
might still go ahead and take her to court, I'm not sure.
I would unless you.
How's when are you gonna start putting out notices on grass? Do you have a date?
I've already
Have you?
been doing
Okay.
them, yeah.
Stuff not being cut.
Yeah, on grass not being cut.
And I
6
got-
inches,
have
I
a
think it
couple
says.
complaints.
8. I think it's
I was in
8.
your neighborhood,
Was it?
yeah.
408 Sunset. I got it. That's my house. Mine got bad. Mine got bad over the weekend. I don't know what happened to it. It
Well,
just
it's tough, you have to always take that into consideration when you have this much rain and
yeah.
be aware about
I
it.
could cut mine twice a week right now.
So Ace
insane.
Hardware, do they have a date, like in, when they're gonna, they're gonna close down the one downtown then and move out to 62?
They still need to get their zoning certificate
Okay,
and
so
engineering
they got some more stuff to do there.
He was here tonight.
and stormwater.
Was he?
The Ace Hardware guy, the engineer.
Is he still planning on closing?
They
that
probably wanted to
downtown?
see if we gave them 2 rows of parking
Is he
out
still planning
front.
on closing the
He
hardware
wanted to
store
see if the other
downtown?
place got it, I think.
Probably, yeah.
New one's
I
ready
would.
to open. They have a one-year lease, which is up. I think they're going to have to renew it for whatever period of time they think it'll take to
Yeah.
build the building.
All right, well, anything else going on that we need to know about?
I'm new here, but I think, how do we move forward with getting design review to have a theme? Do we have a meeting with them? Do we?
Yeah, we can have a work session.
When is that
Direct-
reasonable?
let's Start making some things happen in the background so that you guys, that's a heavy lift. I would not even presume to put that on the board to start that process. We can handle some of that process in-house and then get with you guys. And I'm by no means saying that we will come up with a theme. I'm saying that we will start the process to get it to where you guys can navigate it. Is that okay?
Yeah, you guys could
Yeah,
probably
I'm
just
not-
easily
I'm curious. I
broach
don't know how
the
that works.
subject, and
You tell us this is what you want us
I'm
to
gonna
start
stay out of
working
that
on.
conversation.
We could ask Jack. if that's
Not
okay.
gonna.
Yeah.
Your wife will, Heather will definitely, she had some ideas.
I'm sure she did.
She had to recuse herself today and she was, you could tell she had
She's
ideas.
got ideas. That's why she's there.
Is that okay, Bailey? Am I giving them good direction?
Yeah.
still
Yeah, I
don't
was
understand
asking.
Where you're at, so.
Yeah, I think you could broach the subject at least and talk it through, and then we, once they get rolling, we could have a work session, because we're gonna have to have 1 or 2 in the next 6 months anyway.
Maybe more than that.
Maybe more than that, yeah, depending how things progress. So that's something we can add into one of those.
It'll probably be a somewhat of a conversation whenever, if council does decide to go with a new comp plan or strategic plan. Some of that is gonna be a little bit identified in there, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
The particular plan that is gonna be presented. Usually they try to address some of that, not all of that, but some of it. So it'll be part of the discussion, and hopefully that's where we can,
Figure it out.
kind of jump off from there and take it to the next level.
Let Sean wrap his arms around that one, that design review standards for a few weeks.
All right.
Welcome to the team, buddy. Congratulations.
Anything else?
Yeah, I got
You have
one
one?
thing. Jim, that house on Track Street, they did have it cleaned up, now they're gathering junk again.
Yeah, I saw it yesterday.
Okay,
I've sent the property owners 2 certified letters, and they did react, but now he's just swinging right back the other direction.
yeah, I mean, he had it covered up, then he took it away, then now he's just pulling more
Yeah.
in, so it's just, I don't know what's
Heard
going
the
on
family
there.
restaurant sold again.
I think he's trying to rehab appliances there, and he's.
Oh, really?
Well, but he's got a refrigerator, got the doors off there, I mean, it looks like crap.
Shop
so.
out there by had the milkshakes and stuff.
You see the new sign at Premier?
I'm sorry.
The Premier Dental, they have the new sign.
Yes,
We're
I
not
did
gonna
see
talk
that,
about
thank you,
signs.
yep.
Huh? We're not gonna talk about signs.
I thought we were done.
That's a different meeting. That triggers
No.
people.
No, they, instead of
People
the
get
fabric
triggered by
thing, they
that.
put a permanent
Trigger word.
thing on
I
the
got my
front,
teeth
so
cleaned,
it
man.
was faded, it was looking
It's
nasty.
our last meeting.
Because of the air.
I like it.
Yeah, so they're,
made the
yeah, that's
mistake of-
taken care of.
Anybody else have anything?
No.
All right, make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
I guess. Aye.
Aye is right.
My service is done.
What?
I just want to stop the streaming.